Welcome to episode 326 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bell. How are you, sir?
So good it hurts. How are you?
You should get a doctor to look at that. I'm good. It's been a challenging couple of months on my end, but I'm alive and kicking, which is all I can ask for.
Well, it's good to see you as always.
And you, sir.
I might actually be semi-employed again somewhat soon. So hey, that could be cool. I can move out of the refrigerator cardboard box. Maybe upgrade.
That's just the box your wife put you in. Because
fair enough. That's right. So
well, good. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you. A quick reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express in the show are ours, not those of our employers or customers, as it were. And also a very special thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you very much for your continued support. Y'all are awesome. If you do want to support us, you can do that by going to our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. It's SEC, not the other one. Although we have been thinking about perhaps that is the way to make even more money. But hey, that's something for a future discussion. And by the way, if you do sign up as a donor, you will get these episodes 1 week ahead of everybody else. So that's something you have to look forward to.
You can be pre-angry at our takes 1 week early.
That's right. You can get on and rage post about the dumb stuff we said a whole week early.
That's what the cool people do.
Exactly. And another reminder that we are on YouTube, and we are definitely trying to become YouTube billionaires. We're not quite there. We have to reach that 4,000 hour and 1,000 follower threshold, but we're like halfway there.
And then we start making, I think, like 20 cents a week.
But,
I think.
Yeah. I was going to say it'll be measured in dollars.
But hey, it all goes to cover the costs. And, if there's a little bit extra at the end for, a little bit of coffee for us, that's great. I mean, we would much rather not take sponsors. That's something that we have tried to avoid on the show, so we can give you very completely unbiased and unfiltered advice. I mean, and if there is something that we have a conflict, like I work at a company right now that's going through a breach, we mention that so that hopefully we have some level of credibility and trust with our audience. That's our hope. I'm not trying to disparage those who take sponsorships and say they're not accurate and trustworthy. It's just a choice we made.
And we do have quite a few people offering to sponsor. So that's just something that we've never taken on. So.
I mean, we do have some very unique sponsors, like Funk Defender. They've been a good sponsor.
That's
and
true.
Ed's Budget Bait and Dial-Up Shot.
Ed's has always been good to us. That's true.
Yeah. But, they pretty much pay us in Apple gift cards. So
we do have to fish them to get paid, but it's a whole other story.
Anywho.
So getting into our stories for this week. Our first one comes from cybersecuritynews.com, and the title here is Hackers Actively Compromising Databases Using Legitimate Commands. This is an attack technique or tactic that's been going on for a while. This is reports about some information out of Wiz recently. Wiz is just, they're not only technically great, but they're like an amazing marketing machine. So I got to give my hats off to them for that. They've got us talking about their stuff again. So anyway, this is, I actually experienced this when I was at IBM Cloud. Like we saw this quite often. If you expose one of these databases, MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, any of the Hadoop, CouchDB, Elasticsearch, any of the, especially the open source databases, which historically have had some pretty awful authentication capabilities, or at least from a default perspective. Adversaries have been scanning for these and doing all sorts of things with them. In the past, we've seen them, unauthenticated ones, leveraged to break out, perform privilege escalation and compromise systems. But what they're talking about here is maybe a slightly more pedestrian use. They're connecting to these database servers natively through the native communication port. So like 3306, port 3306 for MySQL, 5432 for Postgres, and so on. Again, looking for either really weak credentials or no authentication at all. Assuming they find one that is not authenticated or that they're able to connect to, they enumerate what's there, and they will systematically delete it, and they'll leave a ransom note. The way they do that is dependent on the specific database that they're connecting to, but they'll basically leave a ransom note that says, you have to pay. And they do that by either creating a table name with the ransom note or inserting a record into a table that they create that has the ransom note. And that ransom note basically says, you've been hacked, and if you want your data back, you have to pay like some fraction of a Bitcoin to this particular Bitcoin wallet. Now, the one thing that I have observed, because this is something that we studied a little bit, because like cloud customers are just really bad about securing databases in my experience. One of the things we observed was the threat actors here aren't encrypting the data. They're just deleting it. And we saw no evidence that they were actually taking copies.
So they say they're taking copies and that it's been backed up. That's what they say in their ransom demand. And they say they can restore it to you if you pay them, but they don't actually have that ability, is what you saw.
That's what we saw. Now, I don't know if this might be a different threat, like tactics
Sure.
may have evolved and there might be a new actor in town that is actually downloading it. But what we saw, generally speaking, was completely automated. They're just, running through these databases. They see it, they wipe it clean, they drop a ransom note. They're not even trying to pull data back.
Rude than normal.
Right. And so we got to a point where like one of the things we would do would just be to scan our own IP space, looking for open database connections of customer instances and looking for that, like the known text that these actors would drop. And we would find a lot of them. And some of them had been there for a long time. And so like, I think there's a lot of kind of abandoned databases. So I'm not like, this has been such a pervasive problem for so long. My hypothesis is that most of the time when this happens, it's ephemeral, or it's like it's something that somebody set up accidentally, or it was a proof of concept that got abandoned or what have you. I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of like actual production instances of data being wiped through this attack, because it's been so common for so long that anybody up to now who's had a database in this kind of configuration is almost certainly going to have been wiped a bunch of times over.
Well, and it's a real basic way to defend against. This is just basic password hygiene that's
yes.
getting bit here, right? This is nothing too sophisticated. They're not using exploits or anything. They're just finding common username passwords, default passwords, unsecured administration consoles, and logging in and using local tools, living off the land, as some would call it, to delete the data. And it being non-prod or experimental might also lead to why they weren't as secured as well as perhaps prod is, right? It's not, people don't think of it as a big deal, but I think this goes back to proper password hygiene. But I do think about something we've talked a lot about on this show. If you're a cloud provider, do you get to a point where you've got to start scanning your own customers for these weaknesses and proactively warn them about them, just for your own reputation and just to protect your own customers? And do you just accept that as liability that you want to take on and spend the cost and the time? Because it's not just finding it and warning them. Inevitably, if you're dealing with unsophisticated customers, then you've got a huge customer service hassle of trying to explain to them and not being accused of being the hacker yourself, which has happened repeatedly. And also, this could backfire on you with your less sophisticated customers. So, but it goes back to something we've talked about on other shows for other sorts of cloud SaaS providers that keep getting bit by poor practices of their own customers. At one point, does it make sense for them to start forcing their customers to be more secure to defend their own reputation?
Yeah, it's there's a couple of levers you can pull. One of them is scanning and notifying customers when you find something. And by the way, I do suspect that the vast majority of instances of this are in a cloud somewhere. It's probably in the 99 percentile, I'm going to bet. Occurs to me, and of course it didn't occur to me at the time I was in cloud. It's one of those things where you get perspective after you've been out for a while. A lot of us had a problem with SMTP. And cloud providers had a major problem with SMTP for a long time because the customers would just set up similarly badly configured SMTP servers, and bad actors would just spam the crap out of the world using systems that were misconfigured on your network. And when I was with the cloud, one actually happened before I took on the role, but I was at IBM when it happened. Like Krebs, I think, rated IBM Cloud at the time as like the number one spam or spam source in the world. And one of the things they did, again, this is before my time, and it's all public record, and I'm not saying anything secret, is they limited customers' use of port 25, and like not that you couldn't use it. It was that by default, it was blocked. And so, like, if you wanted to run a mail server, you had to open up a ticket and sit, and attest that you knew what the heck you were doing.
Well, this goes back to the way we used to run data centers, and the firewall team wasn't going to let you open up a port to the internet with a public IP address unless you knew what you were doing.
Right. But SMTP is the only one, and almost a lot of clouds, like where I have infosec.exchange, it's similar. Like you want to run a mail server, you got to let Hetzner know, and they'll open up port 25 for you. And if you're most every residential ISP in the U.S., at least, I don't know about other countries, blocks port 25. It's become so common, but
that's because that's the problem that's been around the longest, and we have an accepted methodology, and we're very behind the curve on new stuff.
Yes.
Like 3389 probably shouldn't be open, by default, et cetera.
Exactly. So what I'm saying, back to your so very meandering way to answer your question, I really do think that cloud providers should be by default blocking these database ports. Like there's really not a reason that those should be open to the entire internet. And if you do have one, kind of like with SMTP, you should have to open up a ticket with your provider and just attest that you know what you're doing, because eventually this is going to cause reputational harm to them, to the cloud provider.
Yeah, I gotta know. This can't be an amazingly new concept for these providers, but it's such a huge impact that I think that they still are making the decision that it's not worth the pain, the cost, the effort, the potential lost customer base. There's always an equation that's going into a risk acceptance like this, and I think. But the more we see these SaaS tools being abused by customer choices, the more I think these SaaS vendors are going to be pushed down the path of we have to protect ourselves and our other customers from ourselves and our other customers. And it's just going to get more difficult. But the risk is, especially if you're a less sophisticated customer, you may not value that. And that may just be a friction for you. And you may go to a competitor who doesn't enforce that. So it's almost like this prisoner's dilemma, if I'm using the right term, of either the entire industry moves or somebody could be at a competitive disadvantage if they move first.
Yeah, it's a very competitive market for sure, and so they're all very, very, very hesitant to take a step that nobody else is going to take to protect themselves or to protect their reputation at the risk of creating friction for customers. So I
Not to
think
mention the direct costs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think
go
you're
ahead.
right. No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think the cost would probably be a wash, to be frank, because like, yeah, you know, they would have to open up tickets to get unblocked, but at the same time, like how many customer meetings did I have to attend to explain why a customer shouldn't expose their MySQL or their unauthenticated MongoDB to the internet?
Sorry, Joe, that comes from that's a different budget. That's not customer services budgets. They don't care. That's a security budget problem.
Yeah, you're probably right. The other, I think I kind of buried the lead a little bit on the story. I think what they were really trying to hammer home on this is that even if you were monitoring the activity in your database, you wouldn't necessarily notice anything anomalous because these attacks are using legitimate SQL commands. So it's not like they're running malware, they're running ransomware that a tool like CrowdStrike or SentinelOne would detect. It's that they're coming through the normal standard channel for whatever database you're talking about here, and they would be running normal commands coming in as what appears to be a normal user, and therefore it's unlikely to be flagged by any of the normal security tools.
Yeah, and a lot of these you can't even run an EDR platform on them anyway, depending on how abstracted it is away from you. If you're just using an RDS database in AWS, you have no access to the OS level or the container level. So it really comes back to you just have to secure them properly.
True enough. So that's why they say security is hard. So, I'll say one thing. This was something that we were. Let me say it differently. I think a lot of cloud providers or companies who have as part of their business a cloud provider have a functioning model around this. I'm not necessarily sure that a lot of companies outside of that do, but it kind of goes back to this is it's a little bit antithetical to what cloud is supposed to be, but in the spirit of making sure that you're consistently applying security policy across the board, one of the things that a lot of cloud providers enable you to do is apply common policies across all of the tenants that are associated with your master account. What we were working towards and what other cloud providers had done internally was forcing all of their tenants through a common ingress and egress point that was managed by the company. And again, it's kind of antithetical because, you're piling on that additional bureaucracy, but at the same time, it allows you to apply kind of broad strokes precautions, especially in more of a risk-based manner. Like you could say, well, if you're running a production thing, you can be somewhere. If it's being run by a competent production team, it can run in a traditional environment. But everybody else, like their test labs and whatnot, have to be behind this centrally managed thing, and that's where you as a customer could filter out, RDP and MySQL and all that stuff. So that was, that's an option. Again, it's overhead. Like it's friction from an internal consumer standpoint. We're starting to get back to, the having to wait for the IT team to take action, which is again antithetical to the whole cloud model. I mean, look, if I play this out for some amount of time, I think we're going to get back. The pendulum has swung so far to one side, right? I really think this pendulum is going to come back a little bit. It has to, like, it just has to.
In what sense? A little bit more centralized control.
Control
again,
right?
Yeah,
a little more centralized control and oversight. Yes.
I don't know. I would like to see that, but I also don't know that that's the way the industry is going to go. I think we're in the middle of the pain of it every day, so we feel this way. But I think for a lot of executives and business users and people who sign the checks, go fast, break things, get more done. AI can figure it out later. It's security's problem to sort it out. It's legal's problem to sort it out. I don't know, man. I don't know. I hate to be pessimistic about it, but
Yeah, we'll see how it. We'll see how.
Yeah, I hope you're right.
I'm having a hard time seeing. I mean, either we become much less bothered by breaches, or or something has to fundamentally change. That's where I'm at. Anyway, next story comes from Bleeping Computer. The title here is Microsoft hacker. According to Microsoft, hackers target universities in payroll pirate attacks. Now, this is a attack that I mean, it's super intuitive, but like I've not heard about it actually happening until now. So this is a variant of the business email compromise attack where, like, for a long time we've talked about how, bad actors will fool the accounts payable department of a company to change the bank account of a vendor so that when they go to pay for something they bought, they are sending money to the attacker's bank account, not the vendor's bank account. That's been happening for a long time. What this attack is, what's happening here is the bad actors are compromising legitimate email accounts. And in this context, it's of some universities. I think it's at 3 universities so far that Microsoft is saying they found this at, but they're compromising legitimate email accounts. And then they're using those to send out phishing emails to other people. And so from the perspective of the recipients of the phishing email, it's coming from inside the house, as they say. It doesn't trip any alarms. It doesn't have any of the flags about coming from, an outside address. It looks like it's coming from inside the university, and it's designed to fool the victim into logging into their Workday account. However, as you might guess, the URL that you're directed to, or the victims are directed to, is not the actual Workday website. It's something that is used to steal credentials. But once they steal credentials, it actually gets kind of interesting. What they will do is set up mail rules in the victim email box, which will divert emails from Workday so that the victim doesn't see. And I don't know if it's necessarily all Workday emails or only certain select types of emails. Anyway, they will redirect emails so that the victim can't see those emails in their inbox and will actually collect them themselves. They also collect credentials to log into Workday as that victim. And once they do that, they log in and they change the bank account, the direct deposit bank account of the victim employee, which obviously would trigger an email notice, which, because of the mail rule, gets, the employee doesn't actually see that was changed. And now the next time payroll runs, the money is deposited into the attacker controlled bank account, not the employee's bank account. So it's pretty clever. It's very, very similar to what we saw with the accounts payable scams, but it's a little more technical in that it's stealing credentials and they're logging directly into Workday as the victim employee.
Yeah, I mean, it's clever. It's smart. I've thought a lot about SaaS tools like this. Should you be grabbing the log events into a SIM for certain administrative changes and alerting on those, and then being able to check if that's a valid change? But, the problem is, this may be happening, especially in a business of any size, on a regular basis. It's tough to verify all of them. You get alert fatigue, but it's clever. It's very smart. And typically, once again, you've got a situation where the folks administering Workday, in this example, or any other HR platform, probably aren't super technical. They're probably not security savvy. They're probably HR professionals who have also been tasked with running, quote unquote, SaaS, easy to run technology that doesn't require deep technical expertise. But then we get into these situations. Those tools aren't run at the level that an IT professional or security professional would typically run them at, because they have a different skill set than the HR professional who's doing double duty. And I'm not disparaging the HR professional. They've got their own skill set that they care about. They're not a technologist typically. And for most companies, when you look at these tools, they're typically pitched for non-technology people to run. So I worry about that. I worry about this sort of stuff happening a lot. And is your security team out there auditing these tools and how they're set up and how they're run, and knowing where these danger areas are in trying to detect them quickly. And this is yet another example of that. And I really wonder too, well, let's say this happens to you. Like one thing that happens right now, let's say you're scammed and you use Zelle to send money to that scammer, like in a completely unrelated situation. You go to your bank and you're like, hey, I was scammed for $3,000. And they say, no, you authorized that transfer. We have no liability. You chose to do that. So what, in this case, one of my employees has this happen to them and their payroll goes someplace else, at least once. And I go contact Workday and they can say, no, this is an authorized valid login by an authorized valid user who, did it. So not our problem.
Gosh, I don't know. This is at the end of the day, the employer didn't pay you for work that you perform. So I don't know how this will play out.
The employer would certainly have to cough up, but I don't think Workday would accept any liability there either. I think that would be, solely on the employer.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So solely on the employer. There's nobody else. And
at least in the US, right? And I'm not a lawyer. Right. Let's get all the qualifications and caution messages out now.
But I also think, kind of like we saw or are seeing with Salesforce, like if this becomes an incredibly common attack, like it's every freaking week we're talking about, X number of thousand more employees had their Workday accounts compromised and their direct deposit accounts changed. At some point, Workday is going to be, or would be, I think, the victim, or not the victim, the recipient of a lawsuit, or perhaps an attempted class action lawsuit by by victims. So I think right now we can say, this is not, just like it's not Salesforce's problem. Like Salesforce isn't getting hacked, right? It's Workday is not getting hacked. They're very, very clear in this article that this is not Workday getting hacked. It is legitimate employee credentials logging into their account and making a change. And from Workday's perspective, it all looks above board. And from Salesforce's perspective, it all looks above board. So, I think as long as it remains kind of an edge case, Workday's probably not going to have a problem. But if this becomes commonplace, I think they're going to have the same kind of blowback that Salesforce is having.
Well, and I think the key here is, once again, phishing resistant authentication methodologies in some way, right? It's amazing how often we come back to that on this show. And I don't mean to be flippant, or I know it's not easy, but this is another example of how many of your SaaS tools are being run by some sort of, or behind some sort of phishing resistant credential something, whether it's your centralized SSO provider or, whatever it is. And not just MFA, because we the bad guys have plenty of ways to capture and reuse MFA tokens fast enough to get around some of the time-based parameters.
So many things, so many types of attacks that we talk about and we don't talk about would be mitigated by using phishing-resistant authentication. And it's going to be on you as a business or an organization to implement that in some sort of an SSO provider, right? Because you're not going to be able to go to Salesforce and say, we want to set up some phishing-resistant authentication with you. They're going to probably roll their eyes. But they will let you authenticate your employees to your SSO provider. So, if you're using Okta or, right.
Of course, that gets into the problem where sometimes to do that is a tier higher on the price chart for that particular vendor, which becomes an interesting conversation.
But that is a really, really good point. That's a
that's
good point.
Always frustrating. But I think if there's one area that I think a security team or a compliance team should mandate, it's some sort of centralized SSO over everything they can. I think that will solve a ton of problems for companies. And then properly administer your SSO, of course. Yeah.
Now, they do mention in this article, one of the things that they've observed is the attacker creating MFA entitlements, right? So they're on occasion, they're also setting up MFA access as the victim that they have access to.
Yeah.
The only way I think you can really mitigate that is making sure that you have robust processes around setting up new MFA entitlements, but also making sure that if authentication into that mailbox itself required phishing resistant MFA,
Right.
this would have also not been a problem.
Yeah. The other thing you could do is, if possible, grab those admin level logs for this sort of activity, throw it at a SIM, create an alert in the SIM. If it's rare enough, right? We were just talking about this. If it's too noisy, it'll get ignored. But it's rare enough, then you could have your ops folks go, "Hey, did you do this? Was this you?" It might be, you can't stop everything. So sometimes you've got to be able to alert on it in a consistent methodology and then track it down that way. Is kind of the.
Mm-hmm. But this is another one of those items for the security awareness training too. Like, again, it's new and novel, and unlike many of the other things, this is one that would, individually harm employees. Like, an employee would definitely feel this if they fell victim to it.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to our next story. This one comes from Security Affairs, and the title here is Threat Actors Steal Firewall Configs Impacting All SonicWall Cloud Backup Users. So I think we mentioned this in passing in a recent story about another SonicWall issue. At the time, I'm going by memory here, but at the time it was believed that this was the result of password stuffing or credential stuffing. And now that does not appear to be the case. It sounds like there was some vulnerability in the system that SonicWall used to store customer backups, which is not awesome. Initially they said that it was 5% of customers that were impacted and that there were no files leaked. But now they're saying, no, that's wrong. It's all customers who use that backup service, and the adversary got everything. Now they are saying that some of the more sensitive things like passwords that were in those backups are apparently encrypted, but I am a little skeptical about how much you can rely on that given everything else that's been going on here.
Yeah, how well is it encrypted? Is it susceptible to a reasonably low effort attack, et cetera, et cetera?
Exactly. The other thought I had was, it's unfortunate that they didn't have this backup system behind some kind of a firewall. Like, that seemed like it would have been a good idea.
One of the things they talk about is that customers should import a new preference file. So preference file is a bunch of configuration options that apparently was also leaked with the backups. And when they do that, it disrupts IPsec VPNs, one-time password bindings, and user access. So that tells me that it's resetting a whole bunch of credentials, keys, passwords, all sorts of stuff like that must have also been included, encrypted or otherwise, in those backups, because it's likely a full backup. So, but you know what is funny is this feels like, oh, that's just our backups. It's no big deal kind of conversation internally. Like, oh, the backups just go over to that S3 bucket. It's not a big deal. It's fine. Like, and nobody, it's these little side things that bite companies that they don't think about, that they don't properly secure because they don't think it's a big deal. It's not like intuitively thought of as a crown jewel that needs to be hyper protected. The way we're so distributed now with our IT infrastructure, in the olden days when you and I first started, everything was in a data center behind a firewall, and everything had to go through, in general, the IT choke point of that firewall. So things just by default were more strongly hidden, or they were a little more strongly protected, because it was a pain in the arse to get it open to the internet by design. And of course, the whole value proposition of SaaS and cloud and everything else is you don't need to deal with that friction. You can just go do it. And once again, we get into this concept where things are just insecure by design, by accident, and by oversight. And that just keeps biting us over and over and over again. And to your point in the last story, or the story before that, you're thinking that pendulum might swing back. I don't know. But we also don't know how they got these backups, to be clear. I'm making some assumptions. They have not shared how these backups were accessed. It could be something else entirely. But I feel that it's probably one of those things where nobody realized how big of a deal these backups were, and they probably weren't super well protected.
Right. So, in terms of lessons, I had two thoughts. One is, at some point you have to trust vendors. Like, you can't necessarily go in thinking that everybody's going to get hacked, because what are you going to do then? But on the other hand, if you have a sufficiently sensitive environment, which I'll dovetail into that in a second, then maybe you shouldn't host your backups, right? And then the other thought I had was very much related to what you were talking about. Really don't think, and there's kind of two ways to look at this, right? I was thinking it more from the customer perspective, like thinking through what is the risk to my environment if, because I'm using this backup service, somebody steals my backups, like my firewall configurations. Like, how bad is that, right? And how bad would that be for my environment? And making sure that you have the ability to have a really clear-eyed view of what those risks are. Not necessarily that you'll decide to not use it, but that you are going into it with your eyes open. And to your point, from the perspective of SonicWall, probably making sure that you're thinking about it in terms of like, gosh, this is potentially super damaging to like all of our customers who are probably a lot of really large and important, organizations. And, this is a big concentration of risk, and maybe we need to make sure that we're, super diligent about protection. Again, we don't know what happened. Maybe they were like, they had super obnoxious, awesome security around it, and then something just went wrong. I don't know, but I do think that we have a lack of imagination. Like, one of the systemic problems we have in the industry right now is a lack of imagination on what can go wrong and how likely it is to go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, the reality, though, I think about is how many of us have the time, the energy, the staffing to go do that kind of risk analysis on something so relatively obscure as what happens if my backups on this get popped, and what's in my backups and where do they go? Like, I agree with you, but I also feel like that's going to get so deprioritized against everything else going on a list for a risk team to manage.
Yeah.
Like, at some point you're like, cool, I got backups, check, move on.
Right. And it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? Like, it's fine until you find yourself as a SonicWall customer using this service and suddenly your backups have been stolen. Like, it's fine as long as it's not a problem. And I think you're not wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. But at the same time, we don't do that at our own peril. And there's a non-zero chance that we're going to regret not doing it.
I agree with you. It's the proper thing to do. I just think it's very difficult to have the time, the energy, the staffing, the influence, the ability to do it. I think for most companies is low.
Okay, moving on to our next story. This one comes from the Register, and the title here is "Employees Regularly Paste Company Secrets into ChatGPT."
Color me shocked.
I am. I'll jump down to the end for a second. Like, they have the most awesome dig on Microsoft Copilot. Basically, they say, like, everybody's leaking everything into ChatGPT, but nobody's doing anything with Copilot. So I guess Copilot's safe, at least, not because it's secure, just right, because people don't use it. So anyway, this is from a report from a company called LayerX, and I think they have some DLP type browser plugins, and they're reporting based on what they see from their telemetry. And so they're saying that 45% of enterprise employees are using generative AI tools. That feels low from what I can see.
Super low.
Yeah. 77% of those have been copying and pasting data into their chatbot queries. And I know that that's actually becoming, a lot more common because, hey, ChatGPT, help me format this table or whatever. So I think this is becoming pretty common. And then about 22% are copying and pasting data sets that include PII or PCI, which I don't know. I mean, the PCI especially hurts my head. And I'm wondering if they mean like PHI, but you know what?
Could be they just have it as lumped together as one category.
Could be. But that's depending on where you're at in the world. Like that's I think in Europe that may get you the death penalty for a GDPR violation.
At least, and I think like 2 of your relatives.
82% of the uses are going to unmanaged personal accounts of ChatGPT, or I guess other AIs, where enterprises have little or no visibility into what's being shared. Then in those instances, there's no contractual relationship between the company, your employer, and the AI provider that you're using. And so even if you have negotiated like a BAA to cover HIPAA, or you've got some sort of an agreement, data privacy agreement in place for PII, that only works if they're the instance that you've negotiated. If they're using their own personal instance, like, all bets are off. You're back to having a big problem.
Yeah, it's not going to be your isolated instance that hopefully your enterprise is using. That's going into the worldwide training data, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not a single tenant situation at that point.
Yep. So about 40% of file uploads to generative AI sites include PII/PCI data. 39% of those uploads are to non-corporate accounts, again, personal accounts, which is, I know this is bad, but I feel like there isn't anything that is not going to cause this to be twice as bad in a year. Like there's really, other than training, right? We're not prepared, broadly speaking.
No, it's certainly because all these tools are going to get built in all these other tools.
Right.
And so you open up a copy of Microsoft Word and you're working on something, you don't even realize. I mean, at that point, hopefully it's going to a controlled corporate instance. But nonetheless, you don't even realize that everything you're typing is going off to AI to help you. Clippy will show up and say, "Oh, I see you're trying to overthrow a democracy. Can I help you?" And, that sort of thing will happen.
Exactly. So, this, I think we're on a very problematic trend, or very problematic trajectory on corporate use of AI, and not even necessarily from a security perspective, although there certainly are security aspects, but from a privacy standpoint, I think this is a ticking time bomb. I don't know what is going to set it off, but at some point regulators the world is, for better or for worse, I don't care how you think about it, right? The world's becoming much more privacy conscious, and we're seeing increasing numbers of countries putting in place pretty robust privacy laws and regulations. And so I really think we're not far away from, this being viewed by some countries as an enterprising revenue source. So
yeah,
I think we got to get ahead of it.
They kind of paint a bleak picture here of manageability control. But one thing I have seen that works is basically the concept of an old style web proxy, right? Whether it's through agents sitting on your corporate machines or whatever, most of those tools, like a secure web gateway of some variety, can monitor and block for this sort of thing with some lightweight DLP. So there are ways to control it, right? Like I'm familiar with some that you can say, hey, this is my corporate instance of ChatGPT. Anybody trying to go to something else, either redirect and block them, throw up a warning message, whatever. So that is possible. But you just, you need to have the tooling set up. And of course that costs money and time and energy and people to run it properly. But that's probably what I would do is go down the path of having some corporate tooling that is. The other problem is if you don't make this available, people are going to go find it on their own and then they're using something unsanctioned. So I do think there's an aspect of you got to provide the tools people need. And rightly or wrongly, people want these tools right now. And so provide the right tool from an IT perspective, and then monitor for people not using that tool that are using a competitive, unsanctioned version, and somehow guide them back to the right tool. And something like Secure Web Gateway, I think is very handy for that kind of function.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in this movement, as opposed to a lot of others, is that I think there's a lot of corporate executives who view the necessity to move with all due haste into AI as being worth the risk.
Yes.
I don't even know what we're trying to accomplish with AI, but like we need to do more of it. They're incentivizing, and I see it everywhere, right? There's a lot of very hard pushes on employees to embrace AI by the upper levels of the organization. So, I think this is one of those instances where if IT and the security department aren't facilitating, like, you're just going to get left behind. And then, like when the regulators come calling, who are they're not going to go talk to the employees, and the upper executives are going to send them to you. Right? So you're going to have to deal with it one way or the other.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's this land grab, first mover advantage concept that have been beaten into the executives in the U.S. And there's enough potential being pitched and enough imagination has been captured that I think a lot of executives feel it's existential to their company's future, that they've got to adapt AI, and the risks of not adopting it are higher than the security risks of adopting it.
Yeah. And maybe to some extent they're right. I don't know.
They might be. I'm not anti-AI at all, but it's certainly our security stance around it is well behind the curve compared to other mature technologies.
Fair enough. So I think other than implementing technical solutions like what you had mentioned, this is going to be difficult. And I think it's really a discussion between the leadership of the security and privacy teams and the company executives to figure out, like, what is the expectation here? How aggressive or conservative should we be on protecting this? Like, what's our risk tolerance? And then act accordingly. Because I have my opinion, but like, I have a feeling that if I were to go into the average company right now and try to enact my opinion, I'd get bounced out pretty quick.
Especially as you're not an employee.
What are you doing here? Go away.
Who let you in?
All right. Next story comes from the Hacker News, and the title here is From Phishing to Malware, AI Becomes Russia's New Cyber Weapon in War on Ukraine. Now, we don't talk a lot about, this cyber war baloney, but broad strokes, the one thing that I have observed over, the last 20 years in this industry is the stuff that starts up at the top, with the APTs, eventually percolates down through the masses. And so what is being used by APTs today will be used by ransomware and much more garden variety threat actors next week or next year or in the coming time. Now, I think in this instance, like, some of this has already been, we're already seeing some of it being used by more commercial threat actors too. But certainly when you have the funding of a country behind you, you can do a little more sophisticated things. But this story is talking about, the way that Russia is apparently weaponizing AI to attack Ukraine in their ongoing war with Ukraine. Again, I think those tactics are eventually going to be flowing down, more to more pedestrian threat actors. So I always like to keep an eye on this stuff. One of the really notable items I saw in here was how they used AI to formulate an attack, which I think was kind of a hybrid phishing attack that purported to be a security update from ESET, which is, an otherwise legitimate provider of endpoint security products, which once installed created a backdoor. And I really think that we are going to continue seeing that happen a lot more often. And so if I think about, again, what would I be putting into my security awareness training? I think, like, it's very easy for a threat actor who has any specific intention of hitting your organization. They can figure out what endpoint software you're using pretty easily. They just have to go and look on LinkedIn. Like, what kind of job openings are you hiring? Like, they don't have to work too hard to figure that out. And then use techniques like this to try to fool employees into, into doing something because it looks like it's legitimate. It looks like it's coming from the provider of your endpoint security product. And so I think that's something that, we have to be pretty cognizant of. I think a lot of the other tactics are kind of stuff that we've seen before, like booby-trapped RAR archives and the ClickFix style attacks. I guess SVG file attachments are something we've talked about in the past, but I think Microsoft is starting to block rendering of SVGs in their email clients. So that's probably not going to be a big problem for a long time. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to mostly talk about here is the importance of keeping an eye on what's happening in the APT space, not because necessarily you're going to be the target of an APT, but because the people who are targeting you are going to be adopting their techniques probably pretty soon.
Yep, I would agree.
So that's what I wanted to say about that. Again,
and,
there's really not...
Yeah, there's not a ton of detail here that's worth pulling out, other than we've already seen some of the first steps down the path of using AI in various different types of attacks. And it's funny because some people say AI is not useful. Well, it's useful to the bad guys. So some of it's useful.
It's being put to effective use by the AI.
Yeah, and war, for all the tragedy and terror and horror of war, it also has an amazing capacity to drive innovation.
It's very true.
And so keep an eye on that kind of stuff for sure.
All right. Our last story is something of an update to when we talked about last week. This one's from databreaches.net, and the title is From Sizzle to Drizzle to Fizzle, the massive data leak that wasn't.
Much like my dating life before I got married to my lovely wife.
I just had to take a side tangent. I'm glad it didn't work out to her because she's awesome. She's a good person. So I'm glad you found her. And someday you may let her out too.
I'm trying to understand. So you're glad that my dating life was so unsuccessful that I met my wife later. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, okay. I wish you would have met her earlier, but I'm glad that it worked out with her because she's good.
Thank you.
Whatever. Anyway,
there's so many ways.
Forget I said anything. Forget I said anything.
Well, what the 99% of our listeners don't know is that there's so many ways I could take this conversation.
I think most of them know. Oh, they know.
Anyway, so as you were saying, back to databreaches.net, the massive data leak that wasn't.
Yeah, so the threat actors, Scattered Lapsus Hunters, said that they were going to be leaking the data of 39 victims of their Salesforce attacks. And last week's story was, we had a couple about this particular threat actor here, but the last story we covered last week was about how Qantas had obtained an injunction against this threat actor from releasing their data. And you will be shocked, and I say this with all sincerity, you will be shocked to learn that Qantas's information was actually leaked.
Although, as we speculated last week, the injunction may be to keep other people in their country from reporting on it, and could potentially limit some damage. So there could be some actual logic to it. It may not have been solely about trying to get the threat actor not share, but to stop their local media from rebroadcasting it, maybe. Which I can see some logic there. I don't know if I agree with it, but I see the logic.
Yeah, it's a weak. I mean, I don't necessarily know that it protects any of the victims because the people who are going to weaponize the stolen data probably aren't going to get it from the local media.
Look, man, some lawyer got a bonus off that idea, so you just sit down and leave his bonus alone.
You're probably right. Anyway, they leaked the stories. It's kind of interesting, as everything on databreaches.net is quite interesting. But what they're talking about here is that if you rewind a week, this Scattered Lapsus Hunters said that they were going to be releasing the data of 39 companies. And what has happened is they've released 6, including Qantas, and then said that they will not be releasing the other 33. They don't say it directly. They're kind of cute about it. And there's been some back and forth with the people at Databreaches, which one thing I've come to realize is that the threat actors are Facebook friends with a lot of these reporters, I guess, is the best way to think about it. They're just like, call each other up. Hey, what's new?
I don't think anybody calls anybody anymore. I think they just text. They WhatsApp. They Signal. Old man. God. Anyway.
Yeah. So
you're so out of touch. Oh my God.
You're embarrassing. I I got to go turn down my Victrola. Hang on. So anyway, the implication here is that the 33, it's unclear what the threat actor is trying to imply, but one of the potential interpretations of the reason that they didn't release the other 33 is that they paid the ransom, or as the author here points out, that perhaps they had a reason to make people think that those companies paid the ransom, which,
yeah.
So, I was thinking about this because my first inclination was to roll my eyes too. But then I got to thinking, like, again, game theory, right? If I am trying to put myself out there as a threat actor who victims can rely on, follow through. If they pay me to do or not do something and they believe that I'm going to keep my word, they're more likely to pay.
Sure. All of the
right?
Power School situation we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. And so perhaps, and I think this is what one of the points the author was trying to bring up, is that perhaps the reason that they're saying this is to let other future victims have some level of confidence that if they pay, then kind of like those 33, their data won't be exposed.
I don't know. There's another interesting aspect of this is that, and I have to be careful here because I work for SalesLoft, but they also threatened to put up a website on the 10th, which would have been this past couple days ago, of all the victims of the SalesLoft tokens that were used to breach Salesforce. I got to make sure I'm only talking about what's in the public sphere here. That never happened, and we don't really know why, right? They that bit of it, and there was, I think, publicly many hundreds of companies involved there. So they're trying to imply that all those companies paid or Salesforce paid. Seems unlikely, but I have no information one way or the other.
No, I mean, they don't. This article doesn't speak at all to the SalesLoft drift thing. Actually, it doesn't it? So have more than 750 victims in one campaign. Yeah. So I don't know. All I can say is, this threat actor is fascinating, right? Because they were three separate actors. They've been responsible for a lot of fairly high profile attacks like Snowflake and a whole bunch of others. And at the same time, like, they've been having members be arrested left, right, and center, yet they continue on. So I suppose I'm hypothesizing is that they might not be as cohesive and organized as people are perhaps asserting or assuming. And so they may just not have the opportunity to publish it, or maybe they're all busy because they found some new thing to go hack and they'll come back around to it later. I don't know.
Or maybe they don't have the data.
Or maybe they don't have the data. That's right.
They could be lying on. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I one of the most frustrating experiences I had as a CISO was when a threat actor claimed to have hacked us, and later we found some kind of unfortunate back and forth between the reporter who was reporting on it and the threat actor, which pretty clearly indicated that it was a bunch of horseshit that it wasn't real. But it is so frustrating. If somebody comes to you and tells you that you've been hacked, but they don't give you any details, like, that is,
how do you prove the negative?
Yeah, exactly. Like, no details about what was hacked, what kind of data, where, when, what systems, what, so that's super frustrating. And it could be that, right? It could very much be this. And I strongly suspect, because like we heard from, I think it was Okta when we covered the story last week, who was one of the customers of Drift, but they had configured their Salesforce environment so that their tokens were locked to specific IP addresses. And so like they weren't available for use. And like, we don't know how many we just don't know how many others were in the similar situation. Like, maybe all of them. It's highly unlikely, but obviously it's not all of them, because we know right offhand of one. So anyway.
Yeah. I don't
expect you to contribute to this this segment of the.
I will say
discussion.
one thing, which is fascinating, being on the inside of this one, and then watching people do what you and I do on this show, which is riff off of our breach for multiple reasons. Some of which to sell their shiny boxes, some of which to just be thought leaders, whatever. And it is very interesting watching other people do to us what you and I do on this show to other people. Seeing some interesting leaps of logic, especially when it goes to whatever vendor's shiny box they want to sell. I think that's about as specific as I can be.
In most instances, outside of a few, again, in most instances, you don't know everything that happened. And that's true for a lot of the stuff we talk about here. I mean, there's been a few that,
I understand the hypocrisy of what my statement is. Yes, go on.
So you have to fill in. You have to make some guesses or educated guesses about what may have happened, and I mean that's certainly something that we do here. And I like to think that the educated guesses that we make are grounded in experience. But you can also think, like, if you're a vendor, you're going to make guesses that direct the discussion in the direction of your product.
Right. Yeah. The difference with our educated guesses is not followed by, and if you buy our Blinky box, it would stop you from having the same problem.
Right.
And that's the interesting part.
Yeah. I mean, candidly, I'm not sure that a lot of this is Blinky boxable. Like so much of the problem space we have is like hygiene.
Well, that doesn't stop marketing from gonna market.
No, it's true. I think, hygiene is hard. It's not sexy. It's and so making, being able to buy a box to make that rote, painful work go away is pretty damn attractive.
Yes. So anywho, I look forward to a day when I am morally and ethically and legally allowed to discuss all the details. Because, and by the way, it's not like I'm hiding any big skeletons in the closet here. There's not like I'm not trying to be like, ooh, I know things other people don't. It's frustrating to not be allowed to talk about it because I feel like there's interesting things others could learn that would be useful. And I want to get to a point I can do that. I just have to follow the rules.
Not that there's a lot of dirt that you're hiding.
Yeah, I'm not like I don't want to imply like I have any big bombshell information or skeletons that like I can't wait to reveal. And it's nothing like that. It's just there's a lot of fog of war around these situations. That's very typical. There's nothing out of the ordinary for us. It's just being in the middle of it and being on this show and then seeing how the third parties digest what we have been able to release. It's just fascinating to watch all these things interplay. And for various reasons, details that haven't been released or can't be released or aren't known or whatever, how people fill those spots in their own mind.
Absolutely. Back to the story. It'll be very interesting to see if more shoes drop here, or if, again, this threat actor has kind of been on again, off again for a while. So I don't know. Maybe they're in the, they're trying to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. And so I don't know. Who knows? We'll find out probably someday. There'll be a book somebody writes.
I hope so. Maybe us. There was another article I saw on this that they said they're going to take a break until 2026. Again, I don't put a lot of veracity behind what Shiny Hunter Spider Huggers says, but who knows?
Gator Lapsus Bear Hunters. You got to work bear in there somehow.
True. It's true.
Anyway, that was the last story for today. I hope everybody enjoyed this. I certainly did.
I didn't. I thought it was terrible.
That's fine.
Worst show this week.
Double your pay. Hazard pay.
Don't you people understand I'm being forced to do this against my will?
You can find links to the stories we talk about on our website. It's defensivesecurity.org. Look for episode 326. I'll also drop a link to our YouTube page, or the YouTube version of this. And one thing I do want to make sure people understand is, like, there is a video version of this, because I see a lot of people watching the audio version on YouTube, which I find fascinating. Maybe they want to.
Look, maybe they're queuing it up while they're doing other stuff, and YouTube is just their app of choice. Hey, I'm just happy that somebody cares enough to inflict us on themselves in some sort of guilt-ridden, cry for help.
I'm skeptical because I think the viewers who watch the actual video version end up watching for about 3 times as long as the ones that watch the audio only version.
People are fascinated by train wrecks.
We got them aplenty.
It's certainly not for our amazing good looks.
Multiple
rugged
it's like wrecks. Yes.
Not for our rugged handsomeness. Maybe it's for occasional kitty spots. Though I'm still sadly down a kitty in my office.
Kittyless. Anyway,
that should be like you should be able to DoorDash a cat, like emergency cat delivery service.
It's not a bad idea. I think I just
fight
figured
my
out
tongue before.
Yeah. Don't keep going on this thought.
Nope.
Let's just stop.
Nope.
Anyway,
we'll get some YouTube strikes if I keep going on this one. Anyway, you found out your next business idea. Is that what you're going to say?
Yes.
All right.
DoorDasher from the animal shelter to straight to your door.
Anyway, let's wrap it up.
All right. So where can people find you if they want to?
I am on X and your amazing Mastodon instance, infosec.exchange, at Lerg, Lerg.
And I am Jerry on infosec.exchange. And that's pretty much the only place I hang out. Occasionally I'm on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn's kind of a goat rodeo crap show. Like I don't like it there. It's the bad place.
It has definitely been changed a lot.
It's like a bunch of AI written brown nosing bullshit. Like that is the only thing I see there anymore. Or people wanting to pay me to take a survey. Those are like the only 2 things that I see.
Yeah, or salespeople trying to sell you something.
Yeah, well, they see that I'm unemployed and therefore have no use for me.
It's very transactional. That's for damn sure.
Yes. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week ahead, and we'll talk again real soon. Take care.
Great week. Bye-bye.